Last season, the Cavs went 19-46. They got the bottom seed in the Eastern Conference. Their top performers were Garland-Sexton, Kevin Love, and Ayee Drummond, and their more interesting players are Darius Garland and Kevin Porter Jr. Garland-Sexton, in his second year, emerged as a really great young scorer. He showed that promise in his rookie year, but it was relatively inefficient. This year, his efficiency really improved. He gets to the rim a lot for his size. 33% of his field goal attempts come from 0 to 3 feet, and 21.5% come from 3 to 10 feet. He's also a solid mid-range scorer. He shoots pretty good percentages from the mid-range, and he shot a great percentage from 3 on a solid amount of attempts. So he's really a 3-level scorer that has a diverse offensive game. The downside of Garland-Sexton on the offensive side of the ball, though, is he's not a great playmaker. He wasn't really projected to be one. Obviously, with him being below the height of 6'2", you would want him to be a better playmaker because he's really a shooting guard in a point guard's body. So you compound that with the fact that he's playing with Darius Garland a lot of the time, kind of players who are similar to each other, score for his guards, relatively smaller in stature, that kind of creates some problem in terms of playmaking in the backcourt. He's also not a great defender simply because he's smaller than a lot of the players in the NBA. He's really intense and hustles on that end. Just think back to the Josh Hart meme and the Shaqtin' the Fool incident, but he does make a lot of mistakes just because he's really antsy on the defensive end. The Cavs had a better defensive rating by 9 without Sexton on the court. Kevin Love is still putting up good numbers in Cleveland without his good friends or his better teammates than Kyrie Irving and LeBron James being there. He's still putting up great numbers. He's still a great stretch four. He shot a pretty great percentage from 3 on a high amount of attempts. 53.6% of his field goal attempts came from three-point land, and he's still a good playmaker at the 4 position that he's always really been known as. He's still a solid post-up option. He's not the post-up player that we saw in Minnesota, but he got the 12th most post-up possessions in the entire league, and he shot 51.4% from the field out of the post, which is pretty solid. Though he is still not good defensively, never been known as a good defender, and he is getting a bit older, so he's always been a pretty smart defender just in terms of positioning and team defense and communicating, but he is pretty bad in space just because he's never been that quick, and that's pretty amplified by the fact that he's playing power forward in today's NBA. The main bad thing about Kevin Love goes to his contract, because I kind of think it's untradeable just because there's quite a few amount of years left on it, and it is a lot of money. But he is still shooting at a great clip, so maybe a contender would want him just because he's shooting the ball at a great percentage on a high amount of attempts. Ayee Drummond was traded from the Pistons to the Cavaliers last year. He only played 8 games with them. Ayee Drummond, he's a rebounding machine. We've known that about Drummond for the past, 4 or 5 years. He's probably the best rebounder in the league. He's probably been that for the past 2 or 3 years. That's the main value that Drummond brings you. He's also a great inside scorer. I think because he played in Detroit and he was known as the rebound guy and it didn't really contribute to wins, I think a lot of people just gave up on him and they just gravitated to the, hypothesis that he isn't as good as his stats say he is. But he's still a great inside scorer. He's a rim running center. He's a good post-up player as well. He got the 7th most post-up possessions in the league, and from the post, according to NBA.com, he shot 60% from the field. So he's just a bit more than a rebounder. Y'all just got to accept that he is a pretty good inside scorer. Now on defense, I do think his stats kind of inflate his defensive impact. He's a very disruptive player. He's always been that throughout his career. He's always had very high steal numbers playing at the center position, and he's always gotten a bunch of blocks per game, but he is a bit lacking on the little things like closeouts, rotations, the mental aspect of defense. In terms of his contract, he accepted his player option where in an offseason where I thought he'd kind of opt out and be the best free agent on the market or one of the best free agents on the market, but he didn't do that. So it's going to be a big question of what his value is in 2021. looking back on it, I think it is going to be a pretty good decision because a lot of the teams were going to be reserving cap space for the marquee free agents like Giannis, Kawhi, Paul George, maybe Anthony Davis, maybe LeBron James. But LeBron extended. We assume AD is going to be a Laker for life. Giannis extended. Paul George extended, and maybe that makes it more likely that Kawhi will extend. So Andre Drummond is probably going to be the best free agent, or maybe not best, one of the better free agents in a class that we thought was going to be loaded. Darius Garland had a shaky rookie year. He put up some decent enough counting numbers, but he didn't have the best percentage from the field, but he was pretty solid from three. He came into the league as a score-first guard who could play make somewhat, which kind of makes his fit next to Sexton less than ideal. A lot of people make the Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum kind of comparison, but I don't know. Like, Damian Lillard is still a score-first point guard, but he still gets you like 7 or 8 assists per game, so. And also, it's a horrendous defensive fit. Garland's even smaller than Garland-Sexton. So, yeah, I'm just going to have to see a bit more of him this season. I didn't watch him too much, nor did I watch Cavaliers games too much. Kevin Porter Jr., I remember he went to USC, and he didn't play much for some reason off the court. I forgot what it was. But in the NBA, he showed potential as an athletic, inside-out scoring wing. 67% of his field goal attempts came either from three-point land or at the rim. So he's either getting all the way to the rim or taking a catch-and-shoot three. He was a real bright spot for the Cavs, especially as a scorer off the bench after JC was traded. And similar to Garland, I just got to see more out of him just because I didn't watch him that much. In the offseason, the Cleveland Cavaliers acquired JaVale McGee from the Lakers via trade. I guess cool pickup, backup center to Andre Drummond. He's going to give you a lot of the things that Drummond gives you, just some lesser talent. But mainly, this is their main transaction or addition in the offseason. Their draft pick, Isaac Okoro, coming in at number 5. At number 5, I did not think Isaac Okoro was going to go there. I thought he was going to go a bit later, kind of towards the end of the single-digit numbers. I thought they would take Deni Avdija over there. I thought either Chicago or Cleveland were going to take Deni Avdija. But they opted to go with Isaac Okoro, who honestly is a good pick. If this was their guy and they didn't want to risk trading down because maybe some other team was going to snag him, this was a pretty good pick. Because this adds a lot of perimeter defense that is much needed on this Cleveland Cavaliers team. And I mean very much needed. When you have Garland-Sexton and Garland playing in the same backcourt, you got one more position to add some perimeter defense, and Isaac Okoro was the best bet. He's also solid enough as a ball handler. He handled it quite a bit in Auburn and created a bit for himself, mainly getting to the rim. But the main questions for his offensive game were his shooting, which kind of lacked in college, but it looked alright in the preseason. And in terms of free agency signings, none were too significant. Obviously, they probably re-signed some people to fill out their 15-man rotation. But in these videos, I mainly only talk about transactions for players that are meaningful, or will get like meaningful playing time, or are going to be a meaningful part of the team's future. Looking at the depth chart, the Cavs have quite a bit of talent at every level of positions. They have like the best rebounder in the league at center. They have one of the best stretch fours, one of the best, I guess you can say, inside-out scorers at the power forward position, and they have some pretty good scoring at the guard position, so it's a pretty diverse lineup, just not enough talent to really be competitive. Coaching them is JB Bickerstaff, who's kind of bounced around the league over the past couple of years. He's still a relatively young coach. I remember he took over after Kevin McHale was fired in Houston. I think he coached a little bit in Memphis, and now I think he got the job as an interim after the Slugs guy was fired from the Cavs. And now I guess they gave him the full-time job, so good for him. The starting lineup next season should be Garland and Sexton in the backcourt, Isaac Okoro at the small forward position, and Love and Drummond in the front court, running the two big man positions. They'll probably go around 23 and 49, going to be one of the worst teams in the entire league, especially in the East. I think they're going to be better than the Pistons and the Knicks, getting them the 13th seed in the Eastern Conference, and they're going to miss the playoffs. Yeah, the Cavs are one of the bottom dwellers in the Eastern Conference. So nobody's really expecting them to compete for a playoff spot. But it's fine because they're rebuilding, maybe they're selling. They're trying to develop their young talent, their young perimeter trio in Garland, Sexton, and Okoro. Maybe you can say perimeter quartet if you throw in KPJ. Maybe they're going to try and sell and liquidate their assets, their veteran assets of Andre Drummond, Kevin Love, etc. Like if a team wants Drummond as a one-year rental, maybe, I doubt a team would want Drummond as a one-year rental, but hey, I don't know. The NBA is pretty dynamic in terms of what teams want. Maybe a contender would want Love as a floor spacing forward. Maybe a team would want like Osman and Larry Nance, who are also valuable veterans who aren't on the worst contracts in the world. The Cavs have an interesting young core. Right now, Garland-Sexton is their best developing player. He's a great scorer with questions regarding his defense and playmaking. Their 2019 pick Darius Garland has scoring potential but had a rough rookie year. With that duo in the backcourt, a lot of defensive help was needed, and Cleveland possibly added that in the 2020 draft via Isaac Okoro. Along with bench scorer Kevin Porter Jr., the Cavs have a lot of talent and potential on the perimeter. But it remains to be seen if any of these players can be a franchise player for Cleveland. I'd say their best bet for that role is Garland-Sexton, but I wouldn't bet on it. The best bet for the Cavs to find that guy is through the loaded 2021 draft, and I think it's safe to say that Cleveland will definitely have high draft odds to land a top tier pick.